3 hours into working on costumes, and Tony finally spoke. "Well, you've been quiet," he said, tugging the sewing machine and held it up to the light. "It's late," Celia said, folding the shift and putting it with the appropriate collection of dresses. "I'm just tired." "You are such a liar," Tony said. "Now come here and strip down." Usually I like a little dinner before a man asks me to strip, but I'll settle for some coffee," Celia said. Tony shot her a look, then went to the electric kettle and filled it with water. Celia smiled and pulled off her shirt, tossing it to the floor. She held up her shift and shrugged into it, reaching for the corset. "Hey, a little help?" Tony stepped away from the powdered coffee and grabbed the laces. "Good?" Celia nodded and pulled her corset tight, then pulled off her trousers. Tony held out her dress and she stepped into it, slipping her arms into the sleeves and again turning her back to the costumer. "How's the fit now?" Celia stretched and twisted, then turned to Tony and smiled. "Great," she said. He reached out and tucked her hair behind her ears. "Beautiful." Celia smiled. "It was so much easier when I was the invisible assistant." She tugged the dress off again and put her own clothes on. Tony was polite enough to turn his back and prepare the coffee, lots of milk and sugar, just how she liked it, while she did so. "Being invisible is really that important to you?" Tony asked. He handed her the coffee and sat at the sewing machine. Celia took a drink of the coffee, then sank into her own chair. "I see. Love, the problem with your desire to be invisible is that you're too good at it. You do your job too well, making sure that everyone's desires get all sorted out so they can't complain. You can't help it, I would imagine." "I'm too good at my job, so they throw me into acting," Celia scoffed. "You're too nice, too accommodating. You solve everyone's problems. Where else would Rafe turn when he had a problem?" Tony said. Celia took a deep breath. "And now you're running too hard." "No," Celia said, shaking her head. "Being busy isn't the problem. I'm managing all my assignments with plenty of time to spare. Even Bobby isn't complaining. The problem is the acting." "You're good at it," Tony said, looking surprised. "Quite good, actually. Why should that be a problem? Don't like the spotlight?" Celia looked into the coffee cup, watching the creamy liquid swirl around. She hadn't wanted to look back, hadn't wanted to go back to that time. It seemed inevitable, though, and at least Tony was a good man. "I used to love it," she breathed. She let out a breathy laugh and ran her fingers through her hair, making it disheveled. "And I wasn't just good. I was great." "Ever so modest," Tony teased. Celia smiled genuinely, then took another sip of coffee. "What happened?" He asked it gently, making it plain that he actually cared. "My father happened," Celia said. "He used to be in money. Not just stocks or banking, but serious corporate money. We were wealthy and everything around me was posh, from my clothes to my school. I got the lead in a play and my father was thrilled. He said, 'Now, darling, you're getting into the family business.' I didn't understand. Then the authorities came and everything became perfectly clear. The family business. Lying and cheating, making people believe something that wasn't true for our benefit. He was arrested on the opening night of my play." "Oh, Celia, love," Tony breathed. He made as if to rise from his chair and comfort her, but she shook her head, still smiling. "For a time I wanted to get as far away from acting as I could. I couldn't, though. I loved it too much. I loved theater, and after a while I realized that just because my father was a liar didn't mean that everyone was. Sure, actors make everyone believe something that isn't necessarily true, but it's not for their benefit. It's for everyone else's. I wanted a piece of that," Celia said. She grinned, just the barest hint of tears in her eyes. "So I did, and I explored and lived and got to meet people I'd never have met otherwise. I was happy being the invisible assistant, happy letting everyone else have the spotlight, as long as I got to see the smiles on the faces of the audience. That was all I ever wanted." "Then Rafe came and asked you to take over for the part of Jenny." Tony nodded in understanding. "I couldn't say no. I wanted to make him happy, wanted that smile," Celia said. "And now here I am, a hopeless excuse for an actress, finding out that the spotlight is exactly what I didn't want." This time Tony did get up and come wrap his arms around her, strong and safe and secure. "It's not for everyone, but I think the real problem is that you were happy making everyone else happy. What about you? What would make you happy?" "I don't know," Celia said, still smiling, even as a tear traced a track down her cheek. Tony nodded and gave her another squeeze. "Then go take the rest of the night off," Tony said. "It's barely 11. You go out and find a bar, go drink good French wine, and then bring a nice Frenchman back to your room. And in the morning, keep moving forwards." "Is that what you do?" Celia asked, rubbing her face dry with her palm. "Get drunk and have meaningless sex?" "It's not meaningless," Tony countered, shaking his head. "It makes you happy, even for a moment. That's got to be worth something." "I think I'd rather just go take a hot bath," Celia said. "Then go do that. And don't you dare argue with me. I only have to adjust the hem on Walt's trousers. I think I can manage that," Tony said. He took Celia's empty cup and threw it into the rubbish bin, turning his back on her so that she could sneak out. Instead, she stood and put her hands on his shoulders, pressing a kiss to his cheek. "Thank you," Celia said, and slipped out of his room for her own. She did exactly as he told her, drawing a bath and doing absolutely nothing but sitting in the hot water. After an hour of soaking, she toweled off and climbed into bed, her thoughts blissfully empty, and her heart lighter than it had been in days. It wasn't quite meaningless sex, but it did well enough for Celia. She woke with the sun, as was her habit. She ate an apple and had some tea for breakfast and considered going out for a quick walk before waking Bobby up. Yes, Celia decided, pulling on a long men's shirt and belting it around the middle for a dress. It was a good idea. The sun was shining and there was a distinct smell of freshly baked bread in the air. Celia brushed out her hair and threw her bag on her shoulder. She was just passing Bobby's door when it opened and a half-naked figure walked out. Celia halted in shock at the sight of Grayson standing shirtless in the hallway, his eyes wide and fixed on her. "Oh, shit," he said, holding his shirt in his hand. Celia raised her eyebrows. "It's not what you... Actually, it probably is what you think. Just don't... please don't make something big out of it. I think I'm blabbering." "Probably," Celia said. She shook her head, smiling and not entirely faking it. After all, the sight of Grayson's sans shirt was very nice. "Don't worry," she said. "I won't tell anyone if you don't want. No one else is up anyways, so you should be all clear." "Thanks, Graham," Grayson said. That pinched, ever so slightly, but it was a pinch. Tony called her by her real name. Wanting to stay out of the spotlight was fine. Being invisible was fine, but Celia wouldn't have minded if people used her name. She mentally shook herself for being silly and watched Grayson steal down the hall to his own room. Celia pushed open Bobby's door, all thoughts of a walk gone. The actress was wrapped up in a robe, her hair tousled and her skin glowing. She widened her eyes in fear at spotting Celia, then broke out grinning, happier than Celia had ever seen her. "Oh my," Bobby exclaimed, falling backwards on her bed. "I can't believe what just happened." "He was that bad a lover?" Celia joked. Bobby sat up on her elbows and shot Celia a look. Then she laughed and jumped up, spinning Celia around and even going so far as to hug her. "I was afraid that he didn't like me. I mean, everyone expects me to be a bitch because I'm the lead. North is so handsome and he has money and is so far out of my league. But after drinks, things just sort of escalated," Bobby said, covering her obvious blush with her hands. She laughed and Celia couldn't help but smile as well. "Well, congratulations. I hope you'll be happy." Thing was, she meant it. She put Grayson firmly out of her mind and demanded that Bobby recount the details, just like any good friend would do.